So Two-Spirit, they were medicine keepers, they were adoptive parents, they were negotiators, marriage counselors. Like, they held a lot of respect within the community. All for various reasons, of course. Some people believe, like, the term Two-Spirit, like how that comes to be is like in some communities they believe that you're blessed with a masculine and a feminine spirit in one body, where normally most people just get one.
Jack's adoption story is pretty remarkable. They discovered that they were not, in fact, Hispanic, but indigenous, and that discovery has led Jack on an amazing path.
Welcome back to the Family Twist podcast. Our guest this episode is Jack Malmstrom. Jack is the director of the Portland Two-Spirit Society, a drag performer by the name of Hila Suspectum, a Two-Spirit and adoptee advocate, a prominent Portland DJ, and a radio host at KBOO, an independent, member-supported, non-commercial, volunteer-powered community radio station in Portland. Welcome, Jack.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We're really excited to talk about your story. Jack has a very unique adoption story / found family story, which just perfectly fits right in with what we do at Family Twist. Let's talk a little bit about your adoption situation. So, adopted into a white family who were under the impression that you were Hispanic.
Yes.
Not actually, but sort of try to embrace that and kind of include some of that in your upbringing. So talk a little bit about what it was like finding out that you were adopted as a child and what your early life was like.
Yeah, I was adopted at birth. The papers were signed before I was born. There was no real finding out. It was always just an open thing because, it was pretty obvious. I didn't look like my dad or my mom. And so, and they didn't see any, I think sometimes with adoption, there can be a hint of shame with it. And my family didn't really believe in that. They wanted to be open and honest with me completely. And so I always knew I was adopted, and they always, were like, it wasn't because your mom didn't love you. It was just she couldn't take care of you at the time. My adoption was what they call an open adoption. So that means that my mom was open to the idea of having communication with me further down the road if I desired it. And so my parents kept in communication with my birth mom from day one. They sent her updates and baby pictures and phone calls and all of that. And I started talking to my birth mom when I was maybe second or third grade. Started talking to her on the phone. Went down to visit her for the first time when I was 13. So I've always kept in touch with my birth family. And then growing up with my adoptive family, I have an adopted brother who is also white. So we're two adopted siblings, but we don't look anything alike. We're not related in that way. We just have the same last name. Yeah, it was interesting. It always stood out personality-wise and just skin color-wise in the neighborhood as well. It was something that I think my parents already prepared me for by just normalizing the fact that I don't look like them, and that's okay, but people are going to think it's weird. But here's just what you tell them. You say, I'm adopted, and that's fine, and I just it was very normalized for me from the start. So I got very used to explaining that and continuing to explain it even now, well into my 30s. Recently, I was with my mom at dinner, and they assumed that she was my boyfriend's mom because my boyfriend's white. And she's like, no, that's my daughter. It's how it goes. But yeah, I got very comfortable and a very early understanding of I'm going to have to explain myself, which ended up being a good skill to have down the road with all the fun multiple identities I have now.
Well, it sounds like your parents kind of took a similar approach to what Kendall's parents did. His was a closed adoption, but it was never a secret. There was never that whole shameful, oh, we don't want to say. He knew from as early as he could remember, that was the situation. And his mom, I think, sort of explained it the same way.
For sure. And, I knew that my adopted mother really didn't know any history about my birth mother, but she kind of had that same approach. Like, some people just can't take care of babies, and we could. And so we're lucky to have you. It was always positive. And my hometown's about as big as the room that we're sitting in. So, it couldn't have been a secret anyway, right? Mm-hmm. Like, suddenly they have a kid. But to your point, even being a completely white family, my adoptive dad had black hair. My mother had red hair. I was this little blonde haired kid. People would see us out together and be like, really? It was cute, but we didn't have a big resemblance there.
So In the time that you were communicating as a child with your birth mother, did you ask her about your birth father and what kind of information did she provide you?
Yeah, so my birth father was like a weird topic in general. I had asked her and my birth parents, and at first it was a little shaky. They had a very rough understanding at the time. Their understanding, he was in prison and it was gang related and he didn't know about the adoption. So they were always like a little nervous that he might just kind of pop out of the blue and try to take me back or something. They didn't have a full understanding of the situation. And then in talking to my mom about it, I got more details as I got older, of course, because I had asked at like 13 or so. I was like, Mom and Dad say that, my dad was like a gang member. And she's like, well, yeah, kind of basically. What had happened was like they lived in a really rough part of LA. There was a lot of gang activity there. And my birth father had gotten involved somehow and was in the car during a drive-by shooting and, was picked up for that. And she was just like, he was a good person, but he just like, made the wrong friends and was not hanging out with the right people and didn't know what was going to happen, but doesn't matter. He was there anyway. He was a kid. He was like, I don't know. I think he was older than her. So he must have been like 16, 17. I don't know how long he was in prison for. I actually don't remember. But she was just like, I was done by this point. I had asked him to stop hanging out with those people. I didn't like associating with them. My brothers don't associate with them. Like they live next door, but we try to keep our distance because we knew they weren't safe. Eventually, when she found out she was pregnant with me, she, rightfully had this understanding of like, I can't do this. And also like, she was saying they had to, um, hit the floor every now and again because there was gunfire and things like that. So she was like, I didn't want to have to like take you down to the floor with me when the side of our house gets shot up. You know what I mean? Like it
Yeah.
wasn't even safe for me to walk the street by myself. I had to walk with one of my brothers and trying to imagine me at 15 walking with a damn baby stroller in a city like that, in a place like that, like absolutely not. She did not want that life for me. And she was wise enough at that point and determined enough to be like, no, I want something better for this child. And went about trying to figure out how to make that happen. He did not know about it because he was in prison. So she sent him a note that was basically like, I'm pregnant. Also, I'm breaking up with you. Also, I'm giving the baby up for adoption. Bye. Yeah. So his family didn't find out until later as well that she was pregnant and then that I had been adopted out. She didn't really tell anybody. I mean, my own grandma didn't know until my mom had like passed out somehow and they took her to the emergency room and they're like, hey, she's like 8 months pregnant, right? And my grandma is like, what? But my mom had already put stuff in motion. And then my grandma was insistent of like, we'll raise her as your younger sister. We'll do this or that. My mom was like, absolutely not. Like, no, no, it's already done. Her sister-in-law at the time had helped her find a lawyer. And that lawyer was the one that found my adoptive parents and connected them. At 15, like she went through all of that stuff without his help and also was able to recognize like, this isn't the life I want for myself. This isn't the life I want for my child. I need to start making better choices with this. She never said he was like a bad guy or anything. She was just like, yeah, he just was a dumb kid. He was really sweet, but I couldn't keep trying to talk him out of something. He wasn't listening, and if he wanted to be in that life, I couldn't stop him, but I wasn't going to be involved in any of it.
How old were you when he was able to track you down and get in touch and drop this big bombshell on you?
I had just turned 18. He waited specifically till I had turned 18 to hire a private investigator to find me. I think also partially just because like I was an adult at that point. And so if there was any concern about my adoptive parents blocking the communication or whatever, they couldn't really do anything because I was an adult. Yeah, I had just turned 18. I was about to graduate high school. And my mom called me into the kitchen one day and was like, we have a voicemail on the answering machine. It's your birth father. He wants to talk to you. He hired a private investigator to find you. What do you want to do? So I called my birth mom and talked to her about it. And my birth mom was like, before you talk to him, let me talk to him. Give me the number he left. I will call him because I want to make sure that he's serious about this. He hadn't talked in 18 years. So my mom called him and they talked and she was just like, I really want to make sure that you're serious about being in their life and, that this is what you want. Like, you're going to be a parent, you're going to be a dad, you're going to show up for this kid and not just ease some kind of guilt or abandonment or whatever you have going on. And he was insistent, I want to be in their life, like all of this stuff. And so she was like, okay. And so she gave me the okay. So I talked to him, and that was the beginning of it. Yeah. It was weird. It was really weird. I never really was that curious about him. My father growing up was amazing. He was a stay-home dad, so he raised me for the first like 11 years of my life. He's the only dad I really needed, honestly. Like, I was good. It was something every now and again I'd be curious about, and I felt bad. I was like, I don't have any questions for this man. Short of like medical history, I just really had no curiosity whatsoever. Until he was like, surprise, you look Indian. By the way, did you know that you're Indian?
Right.
Do you know whether he has other children?
He does. He has, well, I don't know how many at this point. I know, I think I have like maybe 2 half brothers, and then like 3 or 4 step siblings.
Oh, okay.
I was in touch with them for a short while after he got in touch with me. So once he got in touch with me, I got in touch with his mom, my aunt and uncle, and then some of the kids who were older also added me on MySpace because this was that long ago.
Right.
So we talked on
Right.
MySpace a little bit. I know he had like 1 or 2 other biological children. I'm his oldest, but yeah, so I have, I think, 2 half brothers maybe, and then 3 or 4 step siblings as far as I'm aware. But I haven't talked to them in almost 20 years, I think, at this point or something. Like, it's been a minute.
And does your biological mother have other children?
Yes. So I have 2 half brothers. She got married about a year or 2 after I was born. And they've been married ever since. And they had 2 sons together. So I have a younger brother, Jerry, and younger brother, Alex. Jerry is about 27. Yeah, somewhere around there. He's married, got 2 kids.
Wow.
Alex is a few years younger and just got engaged. Beto, my mom's husband, is amazing. I mean, he knew my mom even when she was going through the whole adoption thing with me. He doesn't really speak a lot of English, and I don't speak Spanish. But in what little English he could tell me the first time I went down to visit them and like stay with them proper, he was telling me, you are my daughter. To me, you're my daughter, which was very sweet. And he's always treated me like his daughter. And, calling him a stepdad feels weird because, like, it doesn't feel like stepdad. He's always been there for my mom, even before I was born,
Right.
So he's just a dad. He's just another dad I have, which is great.
Cool.
Right.
Yeah. And he's a good dad to my brothers. My brothers came out amazing. And like, my brothers always knew about me as well. And it was interesting because they were obsessed with me. They were like totally idolizing, and they never grew up with me. I met them for the first time when they were like 6 and 4. And they used to like watch me. I'd wake up and there'd be 2 little faces just watching me sleep. They always looked up to me and were so excited about having a big sister and all this stuff, which I always thought was amazing that my mom could instill that in them because I was never there. I'm rarely ever there. I can count on one hand the amount of times I've really hung out with my birth family. Regardless of that, my brothers have so much love for me, and it's just really, it feels good. It's just surprising because like I sometimes have trouble connecting because I didn't grow up in that dynamic, even though we all have the exact same, oh my God, the exact same tics and features. And none of my traits are my own. I'm just a carbon copy of my birth mom. It's really frustrating. Every time I visit, I find a new thing that isn't individually mine. And I'm like, oh, great, cool. You do that too? Love it. Wonderful. I'm not unique. Awesome.
I was just going to say that. I thought I was unique.
Yeah. I've always been fascinated by that when I go over to friends' houses or like partners' houses or something, and just like, wow, y'all are painfully related. Like, this is very obvious. And at my brother's wedding, it was my first time being introduced to the larger amount of my birth family. And people approached me and they're like, you're Veronica's daughter, aren't you? So
Wow.
is that obvious? They're like, yeah, it's very obvious. Which is cool.
Wow.
Like, a lifetime of growing up and being used to explaining why I don't look like my parents, and then going into an environment where everyone knows exactly whose daughter I am. It's just like a lot,
Yeah, that's a trip.
Completely relate to that.
So, being 18, getting ready to graduate high school, that is already an insane time for anyone. But then here you have your entire life thinking that you were Hispanic but living in a white family, not Hispanic at all. Your birth father says no, Native American, your birth mother confirms that, and you're all of a sudden, yeah, you're indigenous.
Yep. Yeah, it was frustrating because so my parents were hippies. My dad very much so, flower child of the 70s. So he's why I have all this hair. And he used to have his hair long too and really wanted his children to have long hair. So he was the one who used to brush it. He was a Boy Scout troop leader, so that's how he learned how to braid. So he always took care of my hair anyway and wanted me to have long hair. My brother had the longest mullet for
Yeah.
years. People were like, "Oh, I saw your little sister outside." And I was like, "I don't have a little sister." Oh, my brother. But yeah, he always loved long hair. So I always had a braid and I went through my Princess Jasmine phase, all of that. And then, but once Pocahontas came out, that was it. One was calling me Pocahontas. I have this picture of me at Thanksgiving. I'm in a full Pocahontas, like Pocahontas brand dress
Right.
with the little necklace and everything. Yeah, my mom got me a lot of Pocahontas stuff, and then like everyone was just calling me Pocahontas, and I still get called Pocahontas on the street
Yeah.
by random assholes, like it's just never gonna end. But when that movie came out, boy, was it annoying. And so it's just like a lot of people have approached me in my life and been like, oh my God, their pupils dilate and they're just like, oh, are you Native American? And I'd be like, no, I'm Mexican. And they're like, oh, all right.
Oh,
And I'm
wow.
like, wow, okay. So it was just kind of frustrating. I always say I'm kind of pissed that like everyone knew my racial identity except for me,
Right.
you know?
Yes.
But I mean, at the same time, being Mexican and Hispanic as well is like a complicated identity in itself. It's a mixture of indigenous, heritage and colonization as well. Race is so complicated and it's frustrating. But yeah, it was frustrating, but like weird. It's like having the rug pulled out from under you. Like I've talked with a lot of non-adopted people about this of just you grow up with a solid foundation of who you are and where you come from. Like you have evidence of who you are and where you come from. You trust the people that are raising you, that you are who you are and where you come from. And then one day someone's like, that's not true. And you're just
Mhm.
like, oh, okay. So everything I thought I was is just like out the window at this point. And what do I do with this? What does that mean? It was really surprising and confusing for a little bit. It wasn't like too much of an adjustment. At the time, I really wasn't thinking critically about race. Growing up where I grew up, best way to survive, oftentimes being the only brown kid in the neighborhood or in the soccer team or whatever, you tend to kind of just like bottle up a lot of stuff and be okay with just learning to be the token and not really thinking about it a lot. I didn't have anyone else as well. I had some other friends who were black and brown, but not a lot in the neighborhood. So I never really had anyone to really encourage me to think critically about that stuff. I didn't really think critically about anything I went through growing up until I was in my mid 20s, So the time I never really thought about it. And also because this was like 2007. So we're like fresh out of the George Bush Jr. era and everything with immigration was a big thing. And I had a lot of immigration jokes thrown at me in high school and middle school and all of that, and the way people in my neighborhood were talking about Mexicans, it didn't really feel good to be Mexican. And so I didn't really have a lot of pride in it and didn't really express it. I just was fine with being just ambiguously brown. But once I found out I was Native, then it was just, I don't know anything about that actually. I was fascinated by them as a kid. I just didn't know what that meant. And all the stereotypes run through your head. And then it feels so complicated. And it is. Being Indigenous is so overly complicated. There's definitely been times where I wish I was something else. I went through some
Hmm.
really rough times where I was like, can I just go back to pretending to be Mexican? This identity comes with a lot because it's such a politicized identity to the foundation of this country, politicized. So
Mhm.
it was inheriting a lot of heavy shit that I don't think I was ready for. And again, didn't even begin to fathom or tackle or understand until I was about like 24. So it was a lot. It was a lot.
Did your adoptive parents sort of encourage you to, to learn about what it means to be indigenous, or what was their reaction to finding out?
They were also shocked. They were surprised, but so. It's not every day you get to adopt a racial unicorn. They did encourage me to ask more questions and get to know it. My father has since passed about 10 years now, but my dad was very supportive when he was alive. But my mom to this day is very supportive of the work I did and me connecting with my heritage and everything like that. And they've always wanted that for me. And they knew that that was something they couldn't, give me. They did the best they could with what they had access to. and what they had an understanding of. But they've always encouraged me to learn about things on my own and being curious and going and putting myself out there to find out more. Um, and yeah, they were very supportive from the start. A little bit surprised, but not like totally shocked. They were just like, huh, because like they specifically wanted a Hispanic baby. So they were just like, oh, well, cool. Like, I don't know. Like, it was definitely a surprise. But then again, it was just like, oh, it wasn't until later too when I started working in Indian child welfare. I was like, oh, by the way, like my adoption was like mildly illegal.
Yeah.
But it's okay because I'm like, almost 30 now. So it's fine.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, no one can come after you. Yeah. So they were very supportive with it as well and have continued to be.
Good. Was there an incident that sort of sparked you really wanting to learn more and get involved when you were in your early 20s, or was it just, getting a little bit older, a little bit wiser?
It wasn't until I kind of had this radio show dumped into my lap. So I had always just done the I'm Indigenous and it's fun to think about, making all the jokes on Thanksgiving. I have some reservations about Thanksgiving, stuff like that. But I never really took it seriously. My first tattoo was one of the ones from my tribe, from my father's tribe. And I had researched it a little bit and everything, but that was as far as I went. And so I knew the tribe names, but I didn't really know much about them and didn't really think about it much until I was going through a quarter life crisis. And I was like, I need to find a career. I need to do something. I'm so tired of doing these jobs just for the pay. Like, I want to actually do something I care about and like that can move up or something. So I was doing a bunch of Google searches and I've been complimented on my voice by people. I used to do like call center work. And so I've been complimented on my voice there and like also just like weirdos like restaurants and stuff. Like I've had weird interactions with people in regards to my voice. And so I was like, well, maybe radio is a thing I could do because I'd done podcasting in the past. So I was like, yeah, sure, why not? So I did some Google searching for like training and stuff like that and found KBOO, which is a volunteer community radio station, and they provide free training. So I was like, cool, I'll be there like 3 months, learn how to do the board, learn how to talk on mic, whatever, and then apply to like Z100 or, the basic stations I grew up listening to here. I went there for volunteer orientation and introduced myself, mentioned I was Native and that I wanted to learn everything I could, like all the trainings and stuff. And immediately afterwards, the volunteer coordinator approached me and was like, hey, would you be interested in hosting a show? And I was like, what? And they're like, we've been trying to find a host for our Native hour for like almost a year. And we're kind of embarrassed because we can't find anybody. And I was like, and I was fun employed at this point. So I had all the time in the world to do something.
Mhm.
So I was just like, if you're able to train me on what to do, then yeah, if you give me time to take the classes and know what I'm doing, because I've literally never done this before. And they're like, yeah, no, we will train you and we'll give you support and staff to support you and everything. But we just want a Native person to be hosting the show and you can make it whatever you want. And I was like, okay, sure. So then I kind of stumbled my way into having a weekly live radio show. I inherited this time slot that has been on KBOO for over 40 years now, 30 or 40 years. And so it was a big responsibility and it was a big thing. And so I was like, great, I have a Native radio show. What does that mean? And like, I don't know any
Right.
Native people in the community. I'm not a member of the Native community here. Oh God. Oh Jesus. Like, are they even going to listen to me? Ooh, I'm an outsider. Okay. What do I do? And so as I started to craft my show and create it, I met people through my show. And that's what motivated me more, not only like to connect more with the community here in Portland, but also just to get to know myself and be curious more about my community. Because the big question when you're Indian is, who's your family? Where are you from? And I didn't have answers to that. And there's still some answers I don't have. And I'm able to articulate it now in a way of just like, well, I'm an adoptee, so I have this much information, but that's the best I got for you. But before, that was like the first time I think I ever really felt like shame or guilt about being adopted. Was like I didn't have answers to this. Imposter syndrome is real. Imposter syndrome, even like now, like when that article came out, like I still had imposter syndrome of like, oh God, like, uh,
Mhm.
I've done all this stuff, but I'm still just like, oh Jesus, are people actually gonna think I'm legit? I know I am. I know I exist. I know what I am, who I am, where I come from. I have confidence in it, but every now and again it shakes you. And so the imposter syndrome really started to set in. And it motivated me more to like actually look into it. And then I learned also the best way to do it is, hey, I'm Pima and Yaki. I don't know much about it. Do you know any other Pimas or Yakis? And word travels fast in my community, and they'll hook you up with whoever's from your tribe, which there isn't a lot of out here. There's maybe like 3 Otham out here and like 1 Yaki. So
Wow.
it's a little tricky. But yeah, my show completely changed my life and encouraged me to explore my identity and also become more involved in the community to the point where like my entire career now, up until this point, all of the work I've done within my community nationally, with the federal government, with tribal governments, and with state child welfare services, all of that, none of that would have happened if I didn't start my radio show. That all came from that radio show. So it absolutely changed my life for the better and helped me connect more with who I am as an Indigenous person and connect more with my community and build my own family now of people who are willing to help me reconnect and other adoptees as well who are trying to reconnect. So it's been really great.
Yeah. Sometimes you take that leap of faith and it just changes your entire life.
So can we talk a little bit about Two Spirits and how often do you have to explain what that means to people?
A lot. It varies. So, you kind of gauge the situation of like, do I feel like going into my PowerPoint today? Or do I just say I'm bisexual? It's just one of those things. I've been trying to be more intent. Well, not intentful. What's the word? Like more conscious about like not taking the easy road with it and still sticking with Two Spirit because that is what I am. And not using like Western terms that don't fully fit just because I don't feel like explaining myself. I feel like it's important to normalize using that, identity and term and getting people used to things like that. I mean, same with, they, them pronouns that I use now and stuff like that. Like sometimes it's like, do I feel like stealthing like a girl today? Do I feel like pretending to be a girl for the sake of not having to explain to this person why I'm not a girl? And I'm I've also been working on that for myself as well, because again, like it's important to normalize that and not adjust my identity to make someone else comfortable. So yeah, I do tend to have to explain it a lot, and I'll go into it right now. So Two Spirit, it's an umbrella term that was created by a group of queer Indigenous folks up in Canada back in like the 90s, the early 90s. And basically it's an umbrella term and a placeholder term that we use to describe our LGBTQ relatives, but also it's a cultural role. So in a lot of tribes, queer folks were seen as sacred, and they were medicine keepers, they were adoptive parents, they were negotiators, marriage counselors. Like they held a lot of respect within the community. All for various reasons, of course. Some people believe like the term Two Spirit, like how that comes to be is like in some communities, they believe that you're blessed with a masculine and a feminine spirit in one body, where normally most people just get one. You get two, so you get to see both sides, and that's what makes you a mediator. And not all tribes believe in that, of course, but that's kind of where the term came from. And many tribes like the Navajo have a story about the Natle, which is what they call two-spirited folks, and like man and woman get in a fight, and they go to like I think like 2 islands, and the two-spirited people have to go back and forth and like negotiate them to get back to like all being together again. And like so it's a cultural role too that we hold, and it's very sacred, but it's very hard to like a lot of the words that we had for that in our various communities were erased because of homophobia and Christianity and things like that. And so in some of our communities, those words have become derogatory, or we're told they're derogatory, and it's like, is it really, or is that actually like just something we weren't allowed to say, but that's the real name? It's hard. There's not a lot of research on it. There's a lot more research being done on it, but it's difficult because like obviously they didn't want to keep records of that. And what little records we can find come from a very European lens, be it Spanish or, white European. So it comes from a very hateful and prejudiced lens. So there was a term for us before that called birdash, which is a derogatory term, and it translates to like roughly like young male prostitute. So they already saw us as something like lewd and disgusting, And so in reading journals that do like document this stuff, like it's always like from a very negative aspect. So the whole point of creating this umbrella term was to reclaim our space within our communities again, because homophobia is extremely like present in our indigenous communities, unfortunately. Being able to reclaim that and remember that like obviously queer people exist, like we've existed since the dawn of time. That's just like how that works. I don't know what to tell you. Like we're not a new thing. Gay people have always been around. I don't know why this is like so shocking to people. Gays exist? What? This is news to me. I don't know. Most of us are really like using it as a term until we learn the term for ourselves, like what our individual, because each tribe has like, their own individual beliefs and wording and like also responsibilities, like cultural role responsibilities. If there is a cultural role, I always see Two-Spirit as a cultural role of serving your community, because like one thing that I've noticed, and if you talk to other Two-Spirits as well, a lot of us are in social work. Like an obscene amount of us are in social work and youth work and community work. You will find you'll find a lot of queer people there in general, but like there's a lot of Two-Spirit people in social work and in community work. And I don't think that's a coincidence, and
Right.
I think that's something we've been doing since, the dawn of time is community work. So yeah, so I wanted to, because a lot of the time too, like I noticed in like queer POC spaces, they'll talk about how they feel like they have to choose an identity before they go out. So am I Mexican today or am I gay today? Because I can't blend the two. I feel like I have to pick a side. And I felt like that too. It was like, okay, so I have my indigenous stuff and then I have my gay stuff, but like never the two shall meet. But they have to have, right? Like, and it's just like that questioning of like, again, like gay people exist. They always have. So what did we do about that? And like, how did we see that? And so I started asking questions, but most of the people I asked were straight. So they didn't know. and I got different answers every time. And then finally I was connected to the Portland Two-Spirit Society, and I was able to get more answers and met more Two-Spirit folks, and like started like really being able to like get access to that information. And then after like about a year and a half of like really making sure this is like I have an understanding of this, I decided to identify as, because it felt right. Like bisexual never fit. I used to not even label myself. I used to say I wasn't picky. Like I was that guy. I just cringe every time I think about it. Just like, holy shit. But it was the early 2000s. What are you going to do? Yeah, bisexual never really seemed to fit either. And, all the Western labels were a lot. But Two-Spirit, like, not only incorporates like my queer identity, but I always use Two-Spirit as a gender and sexuality identity. So and it just fits better for me, where like I have to, list all this alphabet soup in Western terms of like, oh yeah, I'm non-binary and bisexual and I guess pansexual and like demisexual and all this, whatever, which is fine. I mean, it's whatevs. It's how English is. I have no respect for that language, but it's how English is. But Two-Spirit encompasses like, it's just to have it in one word makes it so much easier of like an understanding of like, oh, okay, like there's a gender fluidity that comes with that. There's, queerness that comes with that. And I don't have to like, really pinpoint it. It's just an understanding of queer in general, right? It's like how Western people use queer as an umbrella term, and like just keep it at that and not trying to like narrow down or like split hairs of anything. It's just me. It's just how I am. And I can use that term. You can understand that I'm queer, but then the rest that follows is up to me as an individual and like how I am personally. So I really like that about it.
I love the connection too that you make to the community. I mean, I think that when you say Two-Spirit over the years, I've come to understand it that way, as an outsider. I think of it like, yeah, that they're kind of the people that identify as Two-Spirit are always representing their individual communities. I just think that's wonderful.
Yeah, it's really nice to be able to blend those two identities as well, because, there's the shock that gay people exist, but then there's extra shock gay Native Americans exist. What?
Right.
Like
Right.
and that's a whole other thing. But yeah, being able to blend like my racial identity with this and like finding space within that culture and like combining all of it and not feeling like I have to choose one is so freeing. And like I think that there's a lot more recently, like there's a bigger movement of like learning to blend the two identities, because of course we exist within our cultures, we always have, and like learning to stop separating the two and compartmentalizing them and embracing the ability to blend, because once we blend that, we also show up more in our communities and are more represented in our communities in the way that we should be, again, it's about reclaiming that space that we deserve to be in within our culture and our communities, and we always have been. But you know through trauma or all these other things, sometimes that does get lost. So it's an important thing, I think, to learn to be able to blend your culture with your identities, and like it makes me feel more whole as a person to be able to do that. In our communities, unfortunately, like we have a lot of youth suicides, and a good chunk of those youth are LGBTQ youth that are committing suicides in our communities. And so the tribes really wanted and needed that curriculum at the time, and there wasn't really anybody doing that. So I was able to form that and work, and I have like a Two-Spirit 101 presentation that I do, and like working with LGBTQ youth in foster care and all of that stuff. So it took a while to build up confidence to be like, is anyone even going to listen to me? I barely know what I'm doing. Like, I'm just existing. I've just been doing the work, and I'm just talking from what I know in my own perspective. Like, I am no expert on this stuff. I just have lived experience in it, and that's my expertise. I don't have a college degree in anything. I am just speaking from what I have experienced personally, and you can kind of take it or leave it. And I'm just one perspective, and like me personally, I like multiple perspectives so I can get a 360 view of the situation. So I'm just one perspective, and whether or not you agree with me, that's fine.
What's it like educating the tribes on the Two-Spirit?
It's tricky. Some tribes are more open than others, especially depending on location. So, I've worked with tribes in Oklahoma. I've worked with tribes in Arizona, Alaska, North or South Dakota, stuff like that. It really depends. For the most part, though, I think there is an overall understanding that times are changing and that they need to get on board. More and more tribes are legalizing gay marriage on their reservations now, more than ever, even more so than when I started this work. I think at the time when I started, there was only 13 tribes, federally recognized tribes, that like legalized gay marriage. And that's growing. I'm sure it's huge now. I haven't checked in a while, but I'm sure it's a lot more now. And a lot more tribal communities, like the Navajo Nation, for once, like for example, are like doing pride events, actually having their own tribal gay pride events, which is huge. And so I think the attitude is definitely changing in some areas better than others. It's tricky because the church is sometimes very intertwined, like with my own tribe, the Pasquayaki tribe. Catholicism is very prominent there. So it can be a little tricky having these conversations and really having it be heard and taken seriously, and undoing these attitudes. And it can be an uphill battle sometimes, but at the same time, those attitudes are slowly fading out, especially as younger folks are getting hired to work for the tribe and newer ideas are being introduced, and they're hiring from within their own communities, and eventually you're going to catch a gay. Sorry, that's just how it's going to work, because we work for communities, so there's going to be a few of us. And so and there's a big push as well to like hire younger generations and hire from within the community, to keep people employed, and to have youth be more interested in their culture and being involved and stuff like that. So with that movement also is going to help encourage a change in attitude towards LGBTQ people, because you're going to have a younger staff, you're going to have more open-minded people, and you're going to have more queer people on staff in general. So sometimes it can be well received. Sometimes like you have to repeat yourself a few times, and and oftentimes, the people who really aren't willing to budge are going to get flushed out like a kidney stone. Like, time is changing whether you like it or not. So either get with it or like move on like a tumbleweed. I don't know what to tell you, and so it's good to see that change, and it is improving. I wish it was improving a little faster, but the fact that we're even making progress at all is something.
Absolutely. For sure. And before we let you go, I mean, I almost forgot to ask, and it's a shame of me being huge drag fans.
Yeah.
But please tell us a little bit about your drag persona.
Yeah. So my drag persona is Gila Suspectum. It's also my DJ name.
Oh.
So my birth father is from Gila River Indian community. I also kind of identify with a Gila monster because I love heat. I don't know how I've lived in Oregon for like over 30 years. I'm always cold. I wear a hoodie all through summer. So I have created a drag persona. I'm what they call a drag cryptid. So I'm not a drag king. I'm not a drag queen. I'm a drag creature, if you will. So it's more of a like lizard amphibian type of thing. And I say it's like a creature from the Black Lagoon meets Gila monster
Cool.
persona.
Love it.
Yeah. So I'm a member of the Drag House of Smokes here in Portland, and I've just started to do in-person performances. I've done a few on Zoom during COVID and things. I used to stream and on Twitch and do a creature feature, which was my like DJing and drag streaming show that I did on Twitch for a while that I hopefully will bring back. We'll see. Stay tuned. Who knows?
Definitely let us know.
Yeah. I hopefully will go back to Twitch and do creature feature again. I want to do creature feature here in Portland live as well, which would be great. But yeah, I wear my traditional like shells and things like that, along with creature full face creature makeup, fins, the works, fishnets,
Wow.
and contact lenses, all of that. So I really enjoy FX makeup. I've always enjoyed it, and I decided that this was one way for me to like fully express myself and not wait till Halloween to do it. And I have other friend drag performers who were very supportive, and also, getting some more representation out there again, like for non-binary folks like me. And I didn't even know that I could be a cryptid until I like joined a Facebook group and like met other people who did creature drag, because I was like, I don't want to be a drag king. I don't want to dress up like a dude. Like I'm not interested in I'm not interested in gender in general. Like I really can I just be a monster, please? And turns out you can be whatever the hell you want. Drag is whatever the hell you want. So that was really cool for me to find out. So that's what I've been doing currently. And Gila Suspectum is a play on the scientific name of Gila monster. So it's actually Heloderma suspectum. But instead I did Gila as in Gila River, not Helodermum. And suspectum was just a really cool addition to that. Yeah, it's the most poisonous lizard in the United States. So that's pretty cool. And they're also seen as sacred to my tribe too. So because they're very respective. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, and their colors are Halloween, which makes sense because I love Halloween. So there's a lot going on there. But yeah, so that's my drag persona and the things that I do. I do creature drag here in Portland, and hopefully I also did it in Seattle, so hopefully I can do it more nationally and expand my creature domain.
Thank you so much for coming on and sharing so much of your story.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was a blast, and I really hope again like we can follow up at some point. Yeah, I'm very, very happy to be on the show. Thank you so much for having me.
The Family Twist podcast features original music by Cosmic Afterthoughts, is presented by Savoir Faire Marketing Communications, and is produced by How the Cow Ate the Cabbage LLC.